Rise, renew, reconnect. Welcome to From the Ashes, a podcast where every episode ignites hope and healing. In today's episode, my guest Basanth Muralikrishnan and I dive into a variety of topics spanning from neurodivergence and mental health to evolving identities as an artist. Basanth is a highly accomplished world-class saxophonist hailing from a family of musicians. I haven't known Basanth for very long, but what struck me about our conversation was Basanth's warm and humble nature and his willingness to not only share his story vulnerably, but to listen earnestly to mine as well. Please enjoy this heartwarming exchange with Basanth Muralikrishnan.
And the fire in the darkest night, the phoenix burns. It's ready for flight. Shadows may come, try to tear you apart, but you're the flame that ignites.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the show. I am your host, Valerie Beck, and I would like to introduce today's honored guest, joining us all the way from Chennai, India. Basanth Muralikrishnan is a saxophonist that hails from a family of musicians. His style of playing incorporates Carnatic, which is Indian classical, Western classical, and jazz. He's a really prolific player who's played at Carnegie Hall, Sydney Opera House, Walt Disney Concert Hall, the 2012 Olympic Games, and other venues. And he's toured with notable artists such as Benny Dial, Sean Roldan, and Steven Devasi. But most importantly, Basanth is a super sweet individual, and I'm really glad for him to be on the show with me today. So welcome, Basanth.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure, to be here and just share what I have, share what life has been like.
Yeah, it's everybody's story is so different, and it's just cool. First of all, to get someone from all the way across the world. You are literally halfway across the globe right now,
hmm
but with such a colorful background and different experience. So that being said, the first question is more of a personal, curious question. That is, not many people really get drawn to my work, especially when they don't know me. When people do notice what I'm doing, they're usually drawn in for a reason. So my question for you is, what compelled you to connect with me in the first place?
I'm always curious when I see because I had a phase of my life where I was very spiritually inclined, and I was actually gravitating towards sannyasin, which is kind of like I suppose a form of renunciation and detachment. And I really like it when I see people like you that are propagating that type of spiritual connectivity, but not in a the way that tends to be propagated out in the West. And I see your format of it, and it seems very much about like actual wellness and actual like connectivity with yourself. And I really liked that, and that's kind of what compelled me to reach out and say hi.
Yay. Well, that is really beautiful. We can dig into that just a little bit, because it's something that I put a lot of effort into doing, and is that, the spiritual journey is such just a individual journey, because it's like every single soul has to find its own way there.
Mhm.
And I really appreciate what you said about just looking at it not being an external experience, which is sometimes what I feel is propagated in
Mm.
the West. Can you explain a little bit more about what you meant by that?
Yeah. So I do feel like when you take a lot of these yogis that are or any type of these types of spiritual people that are a lot more prominent out there, it seems very like you follow this textbook guide, and through my 7 step, 8 step, whatever the heck program, you achieve enlightenment.
Mm.
And I really like that your approach to it was very much about like, let's figure out what's going on with you. Let's figure out how you are perceiving the world around you and the universe. And let's kind of create something that's a little bit more self-tailored, you know? I really liked that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also was once considering withdrawing
Uh,
from the world. There was a time in my life where it got really dark, and I was looking at all of these teachings. I was doing Vipassana meditation and doing some yoga, and it's like, hmm,
do you
um,
mind going into like what that journey was like for you?
yes, let's go into it a little bit and then we'll go into your From the Ashes story. But it was looking at how I was experiencing a lot of turbulence around relationships.
Uh-huh.
And I was starting to notice how, you know, people walk around wounded and without even realizing it, they're wounding each other.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was doing meditation and I was doing yoga, the texts talk about this and they talk about it in very plain language. There are parts of the Yoga Sutras that talk about like nonviolence, right? Ahimsa and all of that. Like it's very widely discussed in the yoga realm. But I wonder if people really go through the work of internalizing what that actually means. It can get a much more deep. And when I looked at my life and I was looking at just all of my relationships, I was like, I can't control anyone else but me.
Right.
And what can I do to create that environment where I can not only exercise nonviolence, but also not be subject to other people's violence? And I think there was part of me that was like, that did want to escape. And so there's that. It's like you want to get farther into the spiritual journey for yourself because you see that you are also the source of your problems.
Right.
But you could also see like the rest of the world isn't helping. And so it was a fleeting thought. And ultimately, I very much decided that was not my path. And that I wanted to live life. Like I want to go out there and make the mistakes and like feel the love, feel the anguish, feel
Right.
everything rather than try to shelter myself from everything. Right. Because if you shelter
Right.
yourself from anguish and sorrow, you're also sheltering yourself from joy.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of people that like, they get into that space where they consider renunciation as an option more often than not, at least from the people in the circles that I've associated with. It seems that there's a lot of it that's just like kind of escapist in nature.
Mhm.
And then even myself included, when I was in that phase of my life, I had to catch myself and recognize that, hey, a lot of these thoughts are you trying to run away from what you've got going on rather than accept and integrate these things as part of your life. So yeah, I really do resonate with what you just said right now because, yeah. And I do feel like if that is the path that is meant for an individual, that it presents itself in a lot more of a peaceful format, you know?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And without going into too much detail in the Ayurveda stuff, I think Ayurveda also teaches us that that is true, that once you have done all the work and once you have done all of this, then you can withdraw into a state of reflection and all of that. But
Right,
the work needs to be done before that happens.
for sure.
Okay. So with all of that said, I would like you to share From the Ashes story. I want you to think about a pivotal moment in your life where you really had to dig deep and question what you know, who you are, and what you believe.
All right. So I think a lot, if I have to contextualize it like that, a lot of I would say my rising from the ashes story is still ongoing.
Mhm.
And it is more centered around acceptance of, you know, my mental state as a neurodivergent individual. I think growing up, there was a lot of lack of context in that area of my life. And that ended up manifesting in the form of a lot of, you know, difficulties that I did not understand why they were occurring to me. I guess that's the most watered down way of saying it. And then as I grew older, I felt a lot of these themes kind of taking place over and over and over again. And I thought, oh, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe it's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm just, you know. And I think as I tried really hard to convince myself that no, this is just something that I can push through very brute force. It started becoming more and more apparent that it's just not going to work that way, that there has to be very specific systems in place for you to, you know, navigate through certain landscapes that a lot of neurotypical individuals may not have so much difficulty with. For example, like executive functioning, time management, and all of these types of things that are very critical to navigating through today's landscape.
Mhm.
So I would say that my pivotal journey, uh, actually, it's a bit of a departure from music, and it goes into Brawl Stars, which is like it's a video game, and I had gotten a little bit into the competitive space of that game, and I started creating an infrastructure for a community and for an esports team. And what I found happening through that journey was that I was trying so hard to convince myself that I could do something that that I could do something that quote unquote normal people could do, that I was just burning out. Like it became really unsustainable. Like I had a surgery that I had to do on my rotator cuff, and literally the day after surgery, I'm coaching a team for a competitive match. And I really, that didn't make too much sense for me to do. Like it was really just a matter of like I should be able to do it, so I'm doing it. And I think once I kind of sat and really reflected upon myself of like, Bussy, no, wait a second. Like, none of these things that you're doing are inherently sustainable. I think you need to go back to the basics. I think you need to revisit the foundation of how a lot of your life has gone. And I think you need to practice that layer of kindness to yourself. I think that's when things started making a lot more sense. And that's when I kind of found my place in terms of like how to navigate through life without taking it so personally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, a few clarifying questions for the audience, especially because the term neurodivergent is relatively new. Even
Hmm.
back when I was in college studying psychological services, that term was never used. So, can you clear that up for us about what that means and how that occurs for you?
So I am an ADHD autistic individual, and the way that it manifests in my life is that on one side of I'm gonna oversimplify this, because if I really talk about the specifics, we're gonna end up chewing up through like 45 minutes of our time.
Okay.
So on one side of things, there's a part of my brain that really craves spontaneity. And on the other side, there's a part of my brain that really craves structure. And finding the equilibrium between these two states has more or less been the narrative of my life.
Okay.
If I have to like make it very personal and very about myself, you know?
Hmm.
Right. And I think it was kind of a lot of people, when they think of these things, there's a lot of stigma associated with it. And it becomes, I'll be perfectly honest with you, a lot of people don't like to talk about these things because of these perceived notions and stigmas. So I
Hmm.
think there in and of itself was one layer of acceptance. It's just like, hey, I'm ready to talk about these things. I'm ready to, accept this as part of my reality.
Yeah.
That was one defining part of that journey for me, which is still ongoing. Yeah.
Hmm. As we go along, because sometimes I get really nerdy and
Mhm.
I start to think about Ayurveda as we're talking. If you don't
Uh-huh.
mind, I'll kind of sprinkle some of that in, especially since you
Please.
kind of know a little bit of the lingo from
Right.
what you said before, right?
Mm-hmm.
The need for structure and the need for spontaneity in doshic terms.
Mm-hmm.
There's the vata energy, right? The mobile, frenetic, spontaneous, often enthusiastic energy.
Mm-hmm.
And then the structure often is associated with pitta and kapha in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And life is always a balance. And sometimes, though, when the doshas are kind of on opposing ends, that balance can be fought out as a battle.
Right.
Um, because you have vata going much higher than it should be on one end. And then sometimes the other dosha will try to ground, right? So my question for you is like that need to be spontaneous and the need to be structured. Is it a matter of being able to feel kind of stable in oneself that you are trying to balance? What is the need for spontaneity? What does that provide for you?
That's a great question. I think for me, like if I do not, again, I'm going to use very loose language here. If I don't indulge that aspect enough, I start to hit this point where I start traveling towards burnout, essentially.
Mm.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's the simplified answer.
This kind of leads me to my next question because I was going to ask you about your experience with burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been talking a lot about authenticity on this podcast
Wonderful.
when, you know, we don't often talk in very scientific terms. This is more based on your personal experience.
Right.
When we stray too far from authentic self, it kind of grinds down at our soul and that dissipates our energy. This is something we've talked about with different guests and stuff. And when I hear you say, like, I need to be spontaneous, otherwise I will drive myself towards burnout, how much of it is that you, without being able to be spontaneous and do these things, you're straying from kind of your natural self-expression?
So let's just, I want to answer this question kind of like the context of music. So
Mhm.
as a musician, I would kind of consider, like, if I really have to consider myself, I would consider myself an improvising artist.
Mm.
Uh, Right. And I think that that spontaneity in and of itself always presents itself when I'm performing on stage. And it's really, it's interesting because like, I've always, despite having been a musician from such a young age, I've never really identified as a musician. But then as I got older, and then I recognized that it's something that had inherently been a part of myself for so long, it became such a wonderful tool for helping me understand myself,
Okay.
you know? And so I would say, like, the way that I go about performing, like in terms of like I like this layer of structure here, but I also like this layer of spontaneity here. Kind of feels like how I've started approaching my life.
Mhm.
So yeah, I would very much say that, being able to integrate that spontaneity of life is very much essential for me to feel that sense of I am living truly and authentically. Because, if I want to have a day where like I just want to go out and about and be in nature and quote unquote touch grass, I want to
Mhm.
have the luxury to do that. And
Yeah.
I've kind of structured my life in such a way that I have the flexibility to do that.
Okay. So there are a few things I want to ask. What do you feel in the past has kept you from being able to do both, being spontaneous and having structure?
I would very much just say a lack of good systems in my life.
Okay.
Yeah, I think just having those types of self-imposed institutions. Because again, I would always gravitate towards one extreme. And there, when that ends up happening, if you're too spontaneous, then, life just kind of feels like it's happening and you're just living the consequence of happenstance.
Mhm.
And when life feels I'm sorry, but that's too spontaneous. And when it's too structured, it just feels like you're a robot. And I feel like that type of sense that it kind of feels like if I have to, like what a lot of people are going through these days is just like you don't really have the option to, just feel connected with that layer of like, that spontaneity that inherently exists within you.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really does, on these extremes are very for any person, not just myself. Yeah.
It's very relatable.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of have to wonder because we're both artists. And
Mm-hmm.
so there is this understanding of what it feels like to be creatively free and self-expressed. That some people, if they've never been given a chance to develop that side of them, may not even know.
Right.
So it's really interesting. I kind of wonder if someone hasn't had the experience of being able to develop that muscle, what that would feel like. Because it does feel, if I don't go out and do my dancing, right? So I teach dance and I do a lot of freestyle too. This is my main modality.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer to do freestyle as opposed to choreography. If I don't get out and do it sometimes, whether that be in the form of dance or martial arts or whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
I, I will feel it in my mood and I will feel it in my ability to emotionally regulate, I have to do something with my body regularly in order for me to feel like myself.
Right.
Yeah. Has there been a time where that was not available to you?
Um, I don't think so because I think so music was something because both my parents are also Indian classical musicians. So music was something that was always present for me in my life, whether or not I wanted it to.
Mm,
So I guess I could say that the inverse was true, in which there were a lot of instances in my life in which I wanted to not be so artistically inclined and and I didn't have the option to, you know?
okay.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a bit of an anomaly of a perspective, but yeah.
Well, I wonder, so I will tell a little bit about my experience because there was a point in my life where I burnt out on dance.
Oh.
And I was like, I'm done with this. I'm not going to do it anymore. And I did stop for several years. And it was because mm, it had become external in terms of the reasons that I was doing it.
Oh, okay, you mean like that. Okay. Mm.
And also I was finding that I was neglecting a part of myself by over over involving myself in dance. I had neglected other parts of my life that needed attention.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Is that something you could relate with?
Yes, I think that kind of homes in a little bit more. I think this goes back to our conversation about like, when we were talking about renunciation in the beginning, because for me, I was kind of going in the spiritual journey of Ignada yoga, which is like using like sound as like your medium of whatever. And that became when my relationship with music, when I first self-identified with it, but it's also when it became very obsessive,
Okay.
you know? And I was very convinced on this belief that every permutation and combination of any sound or any can be has already existed in nature long before humans have had anything to do with music or sound, anything like that. So I was on that trip of life, and I became very self-obsessed with, oh, I want to discover every permutation and combination of music. It is very, yeah, so I do understand in that sense, when my art became very self-obsessed, and then that led to a degree of just like, I think it was in that phase where I started like integrating into the industry. Like I started like becoming a little bit more well known, and people started calling me for things. And I was still very much in this space of life where I was just like, I don't want to do music as a commercial anything. I just
Mm,
want to do it as a divine sort of something. And yeah, it does have its repercussions for sure. And just in terms of like how you feel about the art.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, totally. I remember being so angry
Mhm.
because I just felt like I couldn't integrate the way that I was expressing myself and the way that I wanted to practice my art with the way that other people were. And I was angry too because I felt like people were exploiting their self-expression.
Mhm.
And
Mean by that?
so it's funny because a lot of people who were professional dancers around me, they would look at me and be like, "Huh, you really love dance."
Mhm.
And it would be like, "Of course I do. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't love it."
Right.
But it was kind of clear to me that for some people, this was more of a means to an end.
Right.
And, ultimately I left. I'm not really it by any standard. Like I'm not involved in professional dancing at all, with the exception of occasionally teaching. And yeah, I don't know if that is relevant to what we were talking about, but that has kind of been my whole burnout story kind of starts there. So I remember, part of my burnout story has a lot to do with that era of my life. And
Right.
yeah, and it was just like reckoning with all of the emotions and thoughts that came with that and what to do. Because I kind of had to recreate myself
Mhm.
after that.
So how would you say that? Like, how does dance place itself in your life now? More, less in terms of just like scheduling and more just like in terms of how you like your overall balance of life, I guess.
You know what? It's been so cool because in 2016, I decided I'm quitting dance. And
Mm-hmm.
I actually, not only did I do that, I took myself from Los Angeles and I moved to New Zealand
Mm-hmm.
with no plan. And I ended up doing like a few dance performances and teaching gigs out there before I finally was like, no,
All
this
right.
doesn't feel good anymore. We're not doing this.
Uh-huh.
So I stopped and I got into some sports like parkour and acrobatics and stuff that like weren't on the artistic side of movement. They just were very, they're more
Mm-hmm.
athletic to still exercise that part of my brain. But
Mm-hmm.
I just left it for a while and I resisted coming back because I think part of me knew I needed the space to figure out how I'm going to be the dancer that I've always wanted to be.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay.
Right? Because the dancers that I always have wanted to be doesn't care honestly about the form.
Uh-huh.
I don't care about the names of all of the different types of dances, the techniques, even the history. Like, that's great. These are all things that I respect and I have drawn knowledge from and all of that. But at the end of the day, I want to represent and honor myself.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
And I like that you know you brought up all these like classifications in the format of art, right? Because having grown up as an Indian classical musician, there's a lot of it that is, very much, things are classified as this, these things have this inherent structure, you cannot deviate from these things. And that in and of itself just it feels so it's like the idea is supposed to be creativity within, a ridiculous amount of structure.
Mhm.
But sometimes that's just so overwhelming. Sometimes you want to take aspects of that, without being so married to, the bodying institutions, and you just want to make some nice art.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just as simple as that.
Yeah, sometimes it's just like you want to spray a rainbow here, whatever, and like you put some glitter over here and not have to worry about, well, like, did my master say that I could put the glitter there? But I think that people get really hung up in preserving tradition and culture, and there's value to that, but there's also fear in
Right.
that. We all came from nothing. All cultures, all traditions came from nothing and were created as living beings.
Right.
And so I think tradition and culture, if we allow it to evolve with the times, evolve with the environment and with the people who are contemporary, then we will continue to evolve as a species, we'll continue to evolve as artists.
I couldn't have said it any better myself. Beautiful. Oh, I like where this conversation went.
And I was that wasn't exactly what I was planning on talking about, but I think it's important. And it's like it's such a good opportunity to because we are both artists from different worlds. Right. But
Hmm.
we've come to a place where it really is rather than being a representation of a fossilized form,
Hmm.
artists are living.
Right.
And a human is living, growing, evolving throughout their life.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And that's something that happens here with like, a lot of these classical art forms is that people get so rigid about the presentation and the preservation of this art that when you try to breathe a new breath of life into something, they're very adamant, they're very resistant, they're just like, no, this is not how we do things. And it's especially like in a very rigid classical art form. So it's really nice. I really like that, you take something like this and you can accept that, art has always gone through the same life cycles as tradition has, in terms of, evolving and in terms of, you know, there's always been someone that's added something to the system that then becomes an inherent part of the system
Mhm.
as that system evolves, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Food for
Yeah.
thought, everyone.
Um,
Okay. So my next question also has something to do with art
mhm,
and and you are a world-class artist. You've really traveled around and you've played at these big venues. And yet you have also struggled through, the mental health challenges and you talk about executive functioning and all of that.
mhm.
So what helps you keep going now as a world-class artist? What are those systems of support that you've put in place for yourself?
So it's a lot of these are very simple things because like for example when I'm traveling a lot sometimes it becomes really difficult to like find that sense of like oh I'm rooted, I'm grounded, I have a routine because it just feels like go 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 something or the other is happening and you're just it just feels so out of your control that eventually that you just kind of resign to that force. And I think for me, it's always the big part of it is just like, okay, when you come back home, these are the things that need to be done no matter what. It's a very basic things that, you know, that most people would not put too much thought into, but just due to the nature of my work and to the nature of my mental space, it becomes things that I have to very actively prioritize, you know? And even something as simple as like, you know, waking up in the morning and fixing your bed, that in itself was one very that took me like 2 years to like really nail down.
Mhm.
2 years of like active continuous thought for it to become a routine.
You're not the first person to tell me a story like that. So, as someone who has practiced Ayurveda for a few years now and have seen clients and all of that, this is a huge part regulating of
Mhm,
self-regulating. I've had a lot of people come to me who tell me like it takes all the energy in the world for them to get ready for bed, or it takes them all of their will to brush their teeth.
right.
I don't think it's so hard for the rest of the world to empathize with this.
Right.
I think we need to be aware that this is a thing
Mm,
because we're so many more people are affected by that, and the nature of society today is to very much value productivity and efficiency
oh,
and like
yes.
yeah, and it's like you're just expected to be on your A game all the time.
Mhm,
People don't realize that when you're burnt out and the burnout takes years, sometimes like a decade, or more to fall into a place where you start to really notice it. It
mhm.
takes it's going to take time, not like one doctor visit, not two doctor visits, not like, just 10 therapy sessions, etc., to get back to a place where you feel supported and energetic. And it takes those little routines
Mhm.
to really get back to a place of functioning.
Yeah. That one hit home.
And
Mm,
I always try to tell people, like, really be patient with yourself and be forgiving to
mm,
yourself.
mhm.
And, just because like you can't get out of bed today doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you.
Right. So I actually have a tattoo on my arm, which serves as my reminder to practice a lot of these things. It's number one as a reminder to, you know, be really kind and forgiving to yourself, but at the same time to not be complacent.
Mm.
So it's just three question marks. There's no like the symbolism behind it is very highly contextual, so I'm not going to go into all of that. But every time I look at this, everything that you said rings true in my head, you know? Yeah, I just felt like sharing that with you.
I love that three question marks.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting because I've heard several thought leaders use this. And a while back, I was having a rough time in life and I was reading Conversations with God. by Neil Donald Walsh. Have you heard of that book?
I am not. I'm looking it up right now.
Okay. I highly recommend it. I read through pretty much the entire series, and it was like reading through it was very meditative.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of put me into this space where it's almost like my consciousness was able to open up.
Mm.
And I remember specifically the moment where it's like 3 questions. If
Mm.
I always could answer or have these 3 questions in the back of my mind, I will be okay. And you know what's kind of sad is I have no idea what those 3 questions are now. They may be in a journal somewhere, but or maybe they're just lost in the consciousness again, and I will have to resummon them at some point.
I was about to be Valerie. Give me the secret to life, please.
But apparently I'm not the only one, because after that, there were quite a few people that I read about who have 3 questions.
uh-huh.
Each set of their questions were different though.
Right. Right. Again, because this is a very individualistic journey. So
Right? Right?
yeah.
And yet there's this 3 questions theme. So I just
Mm.
think it's so fascinating that you had those 3 question marks on your arm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a interesting bit of coincidence. I
Mhm.
like that. It attributes new meaning to this tattoo. Thank you.
Maybe those 3 questions will come to you someday too.
Hopefully. Oh, I love this.
All right. So we have touched upon this before in a different conversation, but we've also talked about being brought up, because you were born in the US, right?
Correct?
And we were both brought up in immigrant households.
Correct.
So how would you contribute, or how would you say that being brought up in an immigrant household has shaped who you are?
I would say I'm very much the product of having grown up in an immigrant household. I am very much the product of it. So for context, my parents got married in the 80s. My father he is a Brahmin and my mother is a Catholic. So they made the decision to move to the United States for us to be a little distant from a lot of the social stigma that would have otherwise been associated with their union.
Wow.
And so I think I on one side of things, yeah, we kind of grew up and they were figuring things out as we were figuring things out. So there's that layer of things. But then on the other side of things, there's also just like, that layer of protection that our parents gave. They're just like, we don't want our children to go through what we had to experience in our life. And honestly, that even comes in the form of like music, having navigate through this career and this industry. My mom wanted my sister to be a doctor and she wanted me to be an engineer, not for any societal reason, but just because of their perceived threats of what this industry can be like.
Mm.
And so yeah, for sure, like the way that both my sister and I had grown up is very much like we have parents that were going through their own thing and they're just trying to build something new in a different country and have their beautiful little slice of life, you know
Yeah.
yeah. No, you're good. What was your experience like?
Yeah. My parents came after they got married,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know exactly why. Well, my dad had gone to engineering school at MIT and he had gotten his doctorate here.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps it was just because the opportunities were better. So they ended up coming in the 80s and settling in Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother ended up getting her master's in computer science. And they worked as computer programmer and engineer. They are kind of poster children, very high achieving people. They both went to the top school in Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
And so having a high standard of performance was not a question.
Right.
It was an expectation, not that was not even verbally said.
Right.
I think I internalized before I even had language. It's because it's funny because I think my parents really did want me to find out my own path in a way. They
Uh-huh.
actually weren't that pushy, and that's rare for immigrant parents.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and there was some real high faith in the American education system and society. So I can't say that my experience was typical. It was it and the more I talk to different people, it's like everyone has different experiences, right? And it's a mixture of circumstances. It could be like your race, your immigrant status. It could be like what city you grew
Right.
up in and all of that. So it's all a
Right.
mix. But I think because of the combination of like my upbringing and the circumstances of United States growing up, right? I
Mm-hmm.
was I was in ninth grade when the Twin Towers were hit,
Uh-huh.
and I was in New York. I was living on Long Island, so I think that those combined experiences, it was like I had a very innocent and very like rosy childhood
Mm-hmm.
because my parents put so much work into making sure that we had that, and so much faith that like that hard work would carry through to me
Mm.
and my sister. And to an extent I think it would have, except that there was a little bit of the shattering of that glass
Mm-hmm.
because just of history of where we were and what was happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Hmm. I was gonna ask you, like, this is a question I like to ask a lot of children of immigrants is, do you feel like are you the older or younger sibling by chance?
Older.
Would you say that there was a difference in how your parents approached you versus your sister?
I don't think so. Are you older or
Because
younger?
I asked this question because there was a very big difference with how my parents approached my sister versus how they approached me. Because I
Okay.
think like when they had her, she was my mom was still in India and my dad had come to the US for his master's. And so like the circumstances around her life were a lot more turbulent in her initial years of her life as opposed to mine. By the time I was in the equation, my parents, they'd already moved to the suburbs, they had all their things in place, and things were a lot more peaceful. So then the way that I kind of was raised, I had little bit more luxury in terms of just like just like the basics, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so and you don't ever really realize that, but then sometimes it translates into like expectations. Like the elder sibling has a lot more, the responsibilities placed upon themselves, and the younger one just kind of like, yeah, let's go. So I was just wondering if there's anything like that in your household, because I have seen a lot of brown people, a lot of Asian people that have gone through circumstances like that. So I was just wondering if you
Okay.
know,
All right. So
yeah.
let's discover then. So how many years apart?
Oh, we're 5 years apart.
Okay. So I'm 2.5 years apart.
Uh-huh.
Fine. You would not know from the way that we were when we were little that things would turn out this way, because my
Uh-huh.
sister was extremely artistic, very gifted. She actually went to art school for the first year of college.
Uh-huh.
More of the rebel when she was a teenager.
Uh-huh.
And then all of a sudden she's like, no, I'm getting out of art school and I'm going to go and study biology and become a nurse.
Oh wow.
And I did the opposite thing. I was straight laced, just like all about performing well in school and doing all the things right. And then this was actually my early 20s though. It was when I pivoted and I was like, everything is everything is messed up and the world is crazy and I am not gonna follow its rules. And I
Oh,
rebelled, and that's when I really leaned into my artist side.
that's beautiful.
So I, I have no idea if that is typical or not.
Hmm.
Yeah, because the way that we were raised, I think, they're like, I think my parents were just surprised, and they continue to be surprised. I think as long as we were respectful and we're not struggling terribly, things were not a huge deal. I did at some point struggled terribly. That
Right.
was when I did get a little bit of flack, but that was actually much later in life.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah. So I guess, from our experiences, it may not, we might not be the correct sample.
I think
Right.
that goes for both of us, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. The last question I want to ask you is kind of a question you already asked me
Uh-huh.
about your music. And I love that you're more of a improvisational artist.
Mm-hmm.
I think being able to improvise is it's so freeing.
Mm-hmm.
I played classical flute growing up, and I was great to until like I was great at just like reproducing a piece,
Uh-huh.
but I would never had the skill or knowledge or confidence to do anything improvisational with it. I just was not taught. And so I never got to fulfill myself as a musician. And
Mm.
dance took over for that because I
Right.
found myself being able to do that with dance. And it has shaped so much of how I think and like so much of my sense of self.
Uh-huh.
So my question is how, what role does music play in forming your sense of self?
Do you want so there's a short answer and there's a long answer. The short answer is that music feels like a very it feels like a part of myself that while I did not have a choice so much just as a result of exposure, that it's something that I hold very near and dear to my heart. And I feel like if I were not, I don't know what I would do if not for music.
Mm.
Yeah, like I cannot imagine myself doing anything other than honoring this art form. Yeah. So, yeah, that wasn't always the case. I think growing up, I had a very interesting relationship with music, having had aptitude but not having had inclination.
Mm.
Um, then as I went through my whole spiritual journey, that's when music really started to become something that I self-identified with, but it took a lot more of an obsessive form at that time. And then the hardships of life kind of, going through my 20s, all the different contexts that had presented themselves, and then kind of how I learned to accept myself in terms of the different areas of life and neurodivergence that we had spoken about, that's when my relationship with music became very healthy. Whereas like you don't you can accept that you have a talent without it being your core identity as such.
Mm.
And it can just be something that you do for the love of doing rather than having to prove that you are exceptional at something. You can just do music to do music.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah.
Doing music to do music.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dancing just to dance.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Or singing just to sing. Right.
Right.
So, where do you see your your self-healing journey going?
I would say just more of the same,
Mhm.
just improving the systems, kind of continuing the practice of self-love, being able to extend whatever sphere of influence I may have into being able to do good for others. I think that's kind of how I would go about it. Just keep it going.
Keep it
Stay
going.
stay positive. Shed
Yeah.
light.
Yeah. I am currently on the path to free myself from the chains of shame.
Ooh, that's a heavy one. Hmm. Do you want to elaborate on that?
So I think that we all have these emotions: shame, guilt, fear, resentment, all of this. One of the emotions that have become prominent because of, I think, low self-esteem and just, having kind of lived a life off rails for a while, is like when you do that, when you kind of rebel, when you're grasping the dark, you make decisions that your future self may not be proud of, right?
Right.
And the consequence of that is that you have shame. And the consequence of shame is that you shrink down yourself. So it's like it feels like you can't walk into a room proudly. It feels like your energy contracts whenever you're around people.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's the part of myself that I am on the path to healing next.
I wish you all the best on that journey.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you for listening to my story as well.
I would have honestly liked to talk less and listen more, but yeah, I don't like talking about myself too much, but I figured, since you
Yeah.
asked.
Well, I think the beauty of this podcast is that we go both ways, right? And
Right,
it's a dialogue. It's not necessarily even an interview.
right.
And I get a lot of people who do kind of just want to tell their own story, but it is just so cool to see that people of different paths can still share very human experiences and honor those. So,
That's beautiful.
yeah, thank you for honestly like providing us the space to do that and to connect on a deeper level.
Thank you so much. This really warmed my heart. I don't know how. I don't know, but I'm touched. That's all I can say. I am very, very touched. I am very happy to have shared this experience with you and whoever may be listening. Yeah, this is very wholesome, very close to my
Yeah.
heart.
All right. Well, I'm going to close off by saying thank you, everyone, for tuning in. You could find out a little bit more about Basanth's amazing background and accomplishments in the show notes. And if you're looking for some of his saxophone clips, they are also out there. So I will make sure to link some of those so you could check it out because he's super cool at the saxophone. All right. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night. Hey listeners, if you're enjoying the stories and insights from the Ashes, why not stay connected with our community? Join my mailing list for bi-weekly updates on upcoming events, wellness tips, fun tidbits, and of course, new podcast episodes. I promise no spam, just valuable content to help you live your best life. Head over to www.intrepidwellness.life and sign up today. Don't miss out, and let's keep the conversation going.